protect the world from devastation.
Oh, yeah,
clipping.
Team Rocket, something or another. Are they communists?
Welcome to Namely 90s. Wow. The podcast that takes you back to the time before smartphones, Google, and Y2K. Join your hosts as they relive the pop culture that shaped a generation and the parts that many people wish they could forget. Listen in to the conversation about how the decade defined those who spent their childhood there and how it shaped them as adults. So, turn down the grunge and dial up the internet. Let's get started. It's time for Namely 90s.
That's right. You're listening to Namely 90s. My name's Andrew, and over there's Brandon.
That's me.
You can find us online at namely90s.com or on Instagram at namely90s. You can also find this show on YouTube every Monday at youtube.com/@namely90s. And if you'd like to support our show, head over to patreon.com/namely90s, also with the 90s, and check out those support levels. We'd sure appreciate it.
Just realized I was dancing like our 45th president.
Yeah. Finally, I'm doing a deep dive again.
Yeah, sorry for taking the last two.
No, I'm not. Don't apologize. It's been crazy busy.
Yeah, well, I just I offered to take them because there were topics that I wanted to talk about that kind of coincided with what was going on. Whereas you managed to find topics that are interesting without having to and
have no relevance to anything remotely related to today.
But that was the point.
Or impossible to search.
But that was the point. That was the point of what you wanted. Why? Because this is your format. You wanted to do the deep dives. You wanted to have like these in-depth looks into parts of the 90s.
Well, I think it's interesting because like people who didn't live through it get to learn about it.
Right.
And then people who did live through it get to understand better what it was all about. And then I can learn about it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot from the last couple of deep dives. And I knew a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so how have you been there?
Good. I finished up my improv class last week. And we're doing a show this Thursday. So shout out to Central Coast Comedy Theater.
Shout out.
I think that's the right word name. I had fun. It was 6 weeks of class, missed 1 week. And then we had 2 weeks where 2 extra weeks where we just went to like an improv show that the theater was putting on and a stand-up show that one of our classmates was in the also put on by the comedy theater. So hopefully I've learned something.
Yeah, well, begin. No, I'm just kidding.
Improv.
My son told me a knock joke today that was really funny.
How did it go?
He said, knock knock.
Who's there?
Yeah.
Yahoo.
Oh god, I clipped really bad there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I actually laughed out loud when he made me do that. I was like, Yahoo.
That's like interrupting cow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I immediately my mind wanted me to go Yahoo or whatever, like the stupid the Yahoo thing.
No, I just randomly did that for no reason.
Yahoo.
Yeah, the Yahoo commercial.
Yeah, which is annoying that my search default in Google keeps turning into something called secure search. I think the kids do it, and it's just Yahoo, and it's the freaking worst search ever. The results are awful.
Yeah, I heard Bing is actually better than Google these days.
Bingling,
which I'm just hesitant to change now. Like
I'm not changing anything.
Yeah. I still run Chrome. I still use Google as my default.
Yeah, same here.
I'm just too old, man. These kids with their talk ticks and the
taking out with their talks out.
Tick out with their talks out. Wasn't that it?
I have to. Speaking of ticking out with your talk out, I have to pee in a cup tomorrow.
Oh, fun.
I also had to take a drug test, but we'll do separate events. Yeah, I'd go down to the old lab core here and deposit a sample.
I don't. Is that isn't deposit a sample a euphemism for something else?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Doesn't it?
That's what you were going for. Gotcha.
But yeah, I thought it was funny that it just flat out says urine drug screen in parentheses, no THC. I'm like, wow, okay, well that's very specific.
Like, do you not want me to put THC in there, or you're not screening for it?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, I'd like set up an appointment, and I have to like go and get something notarized tomorrow, and then
with
get
your urine
check.
I
have to pee on the document and then get it notarized, and then I got to fly to Sacramento.
Unrelated.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you'll just smoke some THC,
grade A reefer.
Yeah,
remember when people said reefer?
Be careful in Sacramento. I hear people getting stabbed there.
Well, I mean, it can't be worse than Spokane. So this is no big secret by this point that we're moving back to Seattle now next week.
Okay.
Did I tell you this?
You didn't officially state it, no.
Oh yeah, I took a job offer in Seattle, so we're moving. Well, eventually we're all moving back to Seattle, but I might be traveling for a bit.
Right.
But like I'm driving around Spokane, and I'm like, in the city there's a lot of weirdos. Like there's just people standing on street corners, like crazily yelling at cars driving by.
I mean, any city seems to have that these days.
And then I was
especially Seattle, like
at a crosswalk, and there was some woman carrying a glass bottle, and she just threw it at the ground, and it shattered everywhere.
That you told me about.
But the problem is here in Spokane, that seems to disseminate to the other surrounding like suburbs quite readily. Whereas in like growing up in the Seattle area, like Seattle itself was not great,
right?
But like there you see panhandlers here or there in our town, Everett, whatever, but there was rarely just a crazed lunatic shouting at cars on the sidewalk.
Well, that's because we didn't go near Mariner a lot.
Sure I did. We were on 128. Anyway, point being, yes, Seattle is bad. Spokane is less bad, but more universally bad. That makes sense. Also,
it's gotten worse since we've left.
Yeah, but I know that, but I've been there recently and it still was the same.
Fair. Okay.
At the outlying areas, I will not dispute that Seattle itself has gotten worse.
Aren't you moving into Seattle?
Well, no, the job is in Seattle. I'm not moving in. What do you think? I made of money?
Well, you said you were looking at the Seattle neighborhoods.
We looked at it, but then we were like, hell no. Anyway, where I'll be working it's in the strip mall in the same parking lot as a Whole Foods. So that's positive.
Yeah, you will get hopefully the Whole Food shoppers will be shanked before you get shanked.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
But there was a point to all that. Oh, the Spokane people are like, well, we're tough on the homeless people. No, you're not. They're like, oh, we have the solutions. No, you don't. Your solution is to just kill people, which you still can't do in this country yet.
No, it seems to be happening a lot, especially the last 2 weeks with the people who are just immediately firing on people, like accidentally driving on their driveway, opening their car door, confusing what is the most generic car in the world for their own.
Yeah, homeless people would be easy to eliminate if they were just school children. You had an AR-15, right?
Exactly.
That's pretty much in this country anyway. Hell. So excited for the job prospect, excited for certain aspects. Working in Seattle should be a little interesting, but yeah, it's good news. It's going to be fun.
Have fun over there. Well, then I feel like I should tease the 3-year anniversary of Namely 90s before it disappears because Andrew has a new job. We have our 3-year anniversary coming up. And if you're interested in sending us a congratulatory message, record yourself, send it to namely90s@gmail.com. And we might play it on the air, which it needs to be in by May 12th. May 12th.
And if you want to send us any leather, please feel free.
This is probably the reason why I wanted to discuss this before we started the episode. But I assume May 12th.
The third anniversary is leather.
Oh.
The first anniversary is paper. The second one's cotton.
Does that apply to digital things?
After all, cotton is the fabric of our lives.
Oh God, I thought you were
and
going
leather is the fabric of our bedroom. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was an S&M joke.
We'll take saddles and are they briddles? Brides?
Bridles?
Bridles. That's the word.
Bridles.
We've definitely gone over.
Yeah, as we always.
I'm trying middle of May.
Middle of May.
It'll probably be out the Monday of the 24th or something. But yeah. 23rd.
Well, we're back with another
22nd.
deep dive episode. As some of you have maybe figured out by now, we switch off between a variety show where we do a variety of things on a show and a deep dive every week. So I'm once again going into the deep, dark depths of some random technical thing that no one probably cares about. But then again, I don't care about Power Rangers. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I do care a little bit about Power Rangers. I thought Zords were swords. I can't help myself.
The fact that you learned something is all that really matters.
But this is a fun one because I'm aware of this having happened. A lot of people our age were aware of it, but didn't really know a lot of the idiosyncrasies or a lot of the history of it. And then people who, of course, are younger listeners who don't exist may want to learn more about what this crazy thing is that we call Y2K.
Yes. Hello, future Zoomer listeners that currently don't exist.
They're listening to this on Zoom. No. So I refer to it solely as Y2K. That's just how I remember it being called.
There was a bug, I recall. Or
officially,
error.
It's called the year 2000 problem.
Oh, wow.
But it was known as the Y2K problem, Y2K scare, millennium bug, Y2K bug, Y2K glitch, Y2K error, blah, 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 blah. But it refers to this concept of these potential computer errors that were related to how the year was abbreviated in coding.
Yes.
So instead of using 4 digits, they used 2 digits. Like right now. I mean, you write the date, you write 23, but someone reading it in 300 years wouldn't know which 23 you're talking about.
Correct.
And so I thought that was interesting because it's like, well, it's kind of lazy. But the idea was that it would switch over from 1999 and then the computers would all think it was 1900 and the world would come screeching to a halt and airplanes would crash into the ocean and everyone's head would blow up and whatever.
Can I ask, I mean, you're probably going to cover this, but why did we think that? Like, why did we think that the computers were self-aware enough to hit a 1900 error?
I think they just didn't know what was going to happen.
Fair.
Because, I'll go through some of the actual errors that did happen, and maybe it'll give some more light. I mean, it gets really technical. I mean, way beyond my level of understanding. But basically, like, the computer does certain calculations based on the date, and so all of a sudden the computer thinks it's 100 years ago, and it causes problems apparently. But we'll get more into the significance of that.
Okay.
And so what I was interested in then learning is like, okay, well, it's called Y2K. And I remember it being like a big thing in the 90s, the late 90s.
So but like, year 1999.
When did it even come to the forefront? Well, I mean, obviously they were programming computers back as early as, I guess, the 50s.
Yeah, with the punch card.
With the punch cards
the Scantrons,
and yeah, a lot of the stuff that came from coding was just like digitizing that. And so anyway, basically there was one guy named Bob Beamer, which I thought was, or Bemer, first noticed the problem in 1958. Believe it or not. Even though you chain smoking, while in the lab, which I always love that about, like, whenever there's like a picture of an old scientist in like a chemistry book, they're just like smoking a cigarette in the lab.
It's black and white. They have like the round glasses and their hair is
my chemistry book literally had a picture of the scientist like with the two, the flasks smoking a cigarette
next to the open like flame from
hanging out of his mouth. Yeah. Exactly. Anyway. So the sad thing is He's like that scientist. He's like Dennis Quaid in The Day After Tomorrow, and he's like, the world's gonna end, and they're like, okay, crazy scientist person.
Or Pierce Brosnan in Dante's Peak.
Yes, that's a classic trope. But basically, he spent the next 20 years fruitlessly trying to raise awareness of the problem with programmers, IBM, the government, and the International Organization for Standardization. Yeah. With no luck, obviously.
If they knew about it that far out and he was like contacting the correct people to contact about that, how did we get to this?
Like, this person's a lunatic.
But it makes sense. Well, I guess it wouldn't have made sense to like, I mean, they're technical Neanderthals at this point to us.
Right. It's like hard to imagine even being able to conceptualize it in 1958.
Right.
The subject of Y2K was the subject of an early book called Computers in Crisis by Jerome. Is that Jeremy or Jerome? I think Jerome and Marilyn Murray,
yeah.
Which was later issued under the title The Year 2000 Computing Crisis in 1996. And it was mentioned first in a Usenet news group, which is like an early internet sort of message board.
Mm-hmm. That's intranet, isn't it? Or is it?
No, news groups were around before
like
the World Wide
Internet.
Web.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
yes,
it was,
which you can check out our deep dive on the World
So it was
Wide
mentioned back there, but basically, it had been mentioned in articles and whatnot from the 70s onward, but really became a looming problem. Like, it was really became a thing in the 90s. But people still just didn't really do anything about it because, as we know about people, they're not really motivated to fix things. Like, in a group mentality. Like, if someone told you you're going to get into a car accident, you would be like, oh, I'm going to wear my seatbelt.
Right.
But if someone said the entire population is going to get into a car accident unless we all work together to wear a seatbelt, everyone would be like, nah, someone else get it. It's fine.
Yeah.
That was a terrible analogy.
But it makes sense.
So,
safety first.
The acronym Y2K was attributed to Massachusetts programmer David Eddy and was coined in an email sent in June of 1995. He said, people were calling it CDC or the Century Date Change or the FADL, which stands for Faulty Date Logic, which has faulty acronym logic because why is there an A in there? And there were other contenders, but Y2K just came off my fingertips. I think it's funny because most people say like rolled off the tongue, but he typed it. So he said came off my fingertips.
He was
typing it out.
See, this is where you go to your board and you hit the button for Homer Simpson going, nerd. Obviously.
So why did we use the 2-digit date format?
Because it was easier.
Well, it turned out that storage, back when those all like computers first came about, storage was really expensive to the point of where the lowest, it was around $10 per kilobyte. And in some cases, more than $100 per kilobyte. So
that's kilobytes, not bits.
Yeah. So
so that's 8 bits.
Kilobyte. So basically, they were trying to find a way to minimize usage, save space. Like, well, those 2 extra digits cost you a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. And they really only gained, like, computers only became widely used in the 20th century. So they would just imagine, you just put the 19 on the front, it assumes a 19, and then you only have to store 2 digits. So it was really a space-saving, money-saving strategy, but there was, the possibility they would become sort of useless after the year 2000. I guess they figured they would have destroyed the planet by then.
2000.
With the whole Cold War and whatnot, they probably thought we were screwed.
Yeah.
But I do think it's funny. I went back and did a calculation, which is probably not correct, but it gives you the gist. If you buy a flash drive and do the math, a kilobyte now costs 0.000006 cents.
Wow.
So,
for our listeners that are younger than us, when we were in high school, like my my MP3 player had 100, like my flash drive MP3 player had 128 megabytes.
Right. And I mean, even some of the computer, like the first computers were like 100 megabytes, the ones that we had as kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then storage just has gotten really, really cheap.
Yeah, it's
especially solid state.
There's a term for that, and I don't remember, but it basically describes it as an exponential growth of storage. Anyway,
and the fact that you can get a USB thumb drive that's 2 terabytes.
Mm-hmm.
Terabytes.
Wow. Seriously?
For $31.
Wow. That's cheaper than... That doesn't sound right.
It is. Amazon.
Okay.
2 terabytes.
SanDisk?
$31. I don't know who makes it. It's probably Chinese.
'Cause I'm pretty sure my 2 terabyte HDD was like still $60 a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's more technology there, and they're like better and faster, and they do other things. But
yeah,
it's just, it was an illustration that it's gotten so cheap. So it's kind of like a legacy problem, but like, who's going to go back and fix that? Well, it turns out people in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So a couple of approaches were used to solve this problem. Basically, you could take the 2-digit years and expand them to include the century, which is sort of like the most, I guess the term is pure solution, because the dates are unambiguous, but it's expensive to implement. You have to test and convert and affect an entire system.
Right.
Whereas with something called date windowing, you would retain the 2-digit years, and the program would determine the century, the 19 or the 20, only when it was needed for like date comparisons and calculations and things.
So what you're saying is there's legacy code out there that's probably being used right now that has the more patchy, only 100-year fix on it, and we'll have another Y2K and
Y3K. No, yes. Y21K. Yes, you make a good point. And even it's interesting. I didn't put all this in there because I didn't have enough space and time, but there's basically like other date glitches that happen. Like in the year 20, I mean, it's just like a totally random example. Like in 2032, it's going to be a problem because like this type of character, has this many digits and it's divisible by this many. It's like these random things you would never think of. It's like,
does that due to the nature of like different like base number systems, or
I think it's something like that. Like it gets really technical for me, but it's like the point being they develop these things and they seem really straightforward. You develop it seems straightforward, but then you don't anticipate some of the problems that could later occur,
right?
Or you don't forward think enough. So yeah, you basically could make patches to the software. That's the more cost effective way to do it, and probably what they ultimately did more of the time back then. So
so when so in the far future, there's just going to be like sudden Y2K style problems that people can anticipate, but also probably will forget about because it's been such a long time since Y2K happened, and they quote unquote fixed it.
And the other issue is something about how there was something about how leap years cause problems because they just assume if it's divisible by 4, it's a leap year, but there's something about like 2100 somehow not being a leap year or something. I don't know. It's just there are more issues than you would think with dates and times when it comes to computers.
Right, and I mean they fix like time with microseconds every whatever year and however many years, and that's we like screwing with time. It's non-linear.
But that's the intro / first tap.
Cool. I have a Namely 90s minute that we can toss off to. Nope.
and now let's go to Brandon for the Namely 90s minute.
Welcome back to our mid-episode break, Namely 90s Minute. Every week we look back at a culturally relevant show, movie, or piece of pop culture that probably helps stoke the algorithm. This week, in honor of Sylvester Stallone returning as Starhawk in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we're looking back at the other time he was in a comic book movie, Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd is a 1995 science fiction action film based off of a 2000 AD comics character of the same name. The film stars Rocky Balboa as the titular character, John Gotti from the HBO TV movie, Martha Kent from Man of Steel,
Why'd you say that name?
a carrot, Lorsan Tekka from The Force Awakens, and Spud from Trainspotting. By the 2080s, much of Earth has become an uninhabitable wasteland. The majority of humanity resides in huge megacities with populations of tens of millions. To combat crime, the traditional justice system has been replaced by a corps of judges whose role combines those of police officer, judge, jury, and executioner. Cut forward to 2139 in Megacity 1, where the top judge, Rambo, assists a rookie judge in ending a block war. A hacker just released from prison is caught in the firefight and hides inside a food dispensing robot, where Judge Tango and Cash finds him, arrests him, and sentences him to 5 years imprisonment for destruction of property. Meanwhile, Rico, a former judge, escapes from prison and returns to Megacity 1 as part of a larger conspiracy to frame Judge Demolition Man and put into power a new corrupt Chief Justice, which happens when a news reporter who is critical of Judge Cobra winds up dead and they find his DNA on the bullet that killed the guy. As he and the hacker from earlier are being shuttled to a penal colony beyond the wastelands, their shuttle is shot down and they're captured by cannibals. The previous Chief Justice, banished to the wastelands, ends up saving them and reveals that Judge Cliffhanger and Rico are both products of a genetic engineering project designed to create the perfect judge, which is why Rico is terrorizing the city and killing other judges in the meantime. The new corrupt Chief Justice tries to reactivate the cloning project with his own DNA, but Rico gets there first and uses a giant robot to kill him and then attack Judge First Blood, the hacker, and the rookie from earlier that helped them once they returned to the city. Rico activates the clones early to stop Judge the Expendables, but they fail and destroy the cloning facility in the process. Rico eventually falls to his death from atop the Statue of Liberty after a final battle. The movie ends as Judge King Shark is exonerated and then offered the vacant Chief Justice position, but he refuses. And that's Judge Dredd in a Namely 90s minute. More or less.
And now back to the show. All right, so we've talked about that. Now let's get to the good stuff. So basically, when the 1st of January 2000 arrived, there were problems, but they were generally considered minor. But I thought I kind of chose a selection of some of the ones that I thought were interesting. Mm-hmm. And I apologize for the pronunciations in advance because some of these are international. In Ishikawa, Japan, the Shika nuclear power plant reported the radiation monitoring equipment failed a few seconds after midnight. Yikes.
Jeez. That's northern Japan. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh boy. At least they didn't get by a tsunami.
That's Honshu? Maybe that's southern Japan.
I don't remember which one. In South Korea, a video store in Gwangju accidentally generated a late fee of approximately 8 million won, which is about $7,000 because
we've all seen Squid Game. We know how much a won is.
The store's computer determined a tape rental to be 100 years overdue. Imagine you get a Blockbuster and they're like, sir.
Hilarious.
Yeah, they hadn't really undergone any software upgrades, so that's why it happened. In Hong Kong, police breathalyzers failed at midnight.
What?
Talk about the luckiest night of your life. You get pulled for a DUI.
It's the end of the world. We've been drinking, and then
they partied like it was 1999.
Because it was.
That's for sure. In Greece, approximately 30,000 cash registers, which is about 10% of all the registers in the country, printed receipts with dates in 1900.
It's not bad.
In Denmark, the first baby born on the 1st of January was recorded as being 100 years old. It's like a Benjamin Button situation.
How? What? Why?
Well, like, couldn't they just go, this child is not 100? And what, they fixed it after the first one?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. In France, the National Weather Forecasting Service, Météo France, said that a date on the web page showed a map with Saturday's weather forecast as 01/01/19100.
That's not gone well.
The computer just had a seizure, and that's the best it could do.
Well, that's fascinating because that means that system built space for more than 2 digits.
It's funny, like the computer almost evolves away, not really, to like come up with a solution for it. Mm-hmm. Speaking of computers evolving, I just reread Michael Crichton's book Prey, which is creepy. It's about like artificial and swarm intelligence. And
is that the one Westworld's based on?
No. Westworld's based on Westworld.
Yeah.
But it's like a swarm of nanoparticles that they programmed to use like a predator-prey model. But then they made them self-powering, and then they give them the ability to reproduce, and then they release them into the wild. It's a great book. Anyway.
That sounds like the Borg from Star Trek.
And
its origins.
Jostling my desk around. In Germany, at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, the payroll system interpreted the new year to be 1900. And because of that, they wrongly withheld government childcare subsidies in the paychecks because they thought all the kids had turned 100 or more. And so that caused some issues. They had to reset, the accountants had to reset the OS back to 1999 temporarily.
That's unfortunate.
A German bank accidentally transferred 12 million Deutschmarks, or 6.2 million US dollars, to a customer with a statement dated the 30th of December, 1899. Like, that one just completely lost its mind.
How's that? Yeah, that means so the computer thought that the 19 like the prefixed 19 digit was somehow editable.
It's bizarre. In Italy, courthouse computers showed an upcoming release date for some prisoners as January 10th, 1900, and some other inmates wrongly showed up as having 100 additional years on their sentences. Now, that's the opposite of the breathalyzer problem. Mm-hmm. That's a bummer. And
they never fix it to this day.
In Norway, a daycare center for kindergartners in Oslo offered a spot to a 105-year-old woman because the registry only showed the last 2 digits of their years of birth.
And they have socialized childcare.
Sweden main hospital and other regional hospitals reported that machines used for doing EKGs failed to operate, but then it didn't affect patients. Like, what? You're having a heart attack. Like, I'm sorry, our machine's not working.
I mean, you could still read an electrocardiogram,
but it said that they
interpreting it through a machine.
It says failed to operate.
Yes, but it's the machines used for reading them.
Yeah, but it failed to operate means it failed to work.
Right, but they still had the EKGs. Couldn't you?
It connects to a computer and displays a readout. I'm not sure if they're meaning that like completely broke or like there was some functionality.
Well, back then was there no like manual?
Well, there might have
readout.
Been. I mean, they may not have had them there. Yeah, it's like a seismograph for your heart.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, in the United Kingdom,
Sheffield,
there was a Y2K bug that wasn't even discovered until the 24th of May. This one's bad, which caused computers to miscalculate the ages of pregnant mothers, which led to 154 patients receiving incorrect risk assessments for having a child with Down syndrome. As a direct result, 2 abortions were carried out, and 4 babies with Down syndrome were also born to mothers who had been told they were in the low risk group. Yikes.
What?
Yeah. Did not know about that one. I was wondering if there were... Yeah, wow.
How wouldn't it...
I don't know. You'd think it'd make them look older.
Right. But maybe it made them think they were so young that...
Or, no, but for some of them, it made them think they were so high risk because of their age that an abortion was performed.
Okay.
So that hasn't gone well.
What?
In the U.S., the United States Naval Observatory, which runs the master clock that keeps the country's official time, gave the date on its website as the 1st of January, 19100.
That's just...
And the ATF could not register new firearms dealers for 5 days because they had some issues there.
Unless you went to a gun show.
And in a similar theme, New York, to the other one before, New York video store accidentally generated a $91,250 late fee because the tape was 100 years overdue. And they didn't rewind it either, which was a big problem.
We'd charge them at least $90,000 of that.
Here's a good one. In Tennessee, the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is a nuclear materials manufacturing facility for the U.S. government, stated that a Y2K glitch caused an unspecified malfunction in the system for determining the weight and composition of nuclear substances at a nuclear weapons plant. Although the Department of Energy said they were able to keep track of all the material, and it was resolved within a few hours. Yikes.
What?
Visa and MasterCard said a few of their customers were being charged multiple times for transactions, and Hotmail said that emails that were sent in October of 1999 or earlier showed up as having been sent in 2099.
Do you remember that? I don't remember that.
Which one?
Having the emails.
Oh, no, not at all. I don't think I had Hotmail as early as 2000.
I guess didn't we?
I'm not in the 5th grade now.
By 6th grade.
Maybe. Well, that was later.
Yeah, I guess, because we had AIM.
And this is where it gets fun. A variety of fringe groups and individuals, such as those within some fundamentalist religious organizations, survivalists, cults, antisocial movements, self-sufficiency enthusiasts, why is that a thing? Communes and those attracted to conspiracy theories embraced Y2K as a tool to engender fear and provide a form of evidence for their respective theories. Wow, this does not sound familiar at all, does it?
Yeah, it does.
I think the biggest one for me was the survivalist kind of thing. Like people were kind of prepping.
Oh yeah, the prepping movement was big.
That kind of peaked around the 1999 year, and it was kind of before they started making the efforts to fix everything. Some people who were, I don't know, not well regarded but well known. I won't say their names because they're stupid. Anticipated widespread power outages, food and gasoline shortages, toilet paper shortages. No, that wasn't a thing back then. And other emergencies. They raised this alarm because they felt like they weren't taking it seriously. It wasn't getting fixed fast enough. And it's interesting because you're relying on the government and private industry to work together to make this happen.
I vaguely remember people running for supplies like towards the end of 1999.
Yeah, it happened for sure.
Yeah.
The promotion of these things, of the perceived risks of Y2K, was combined with like a lot of end times thinking. And of course, it was the ultra-right Christians. The New York Times reported in late 1999, the Reverend Jerry Falwell suggested, rip to the least. The Reverend Jerry Falwell suggested that Y2K would be the confirmation of Christian prophecy, God's instrument to shake this nation, to humble this nation. The Y2K crisis might incite a worldwide revival that would lead to the rapture of the church. Along with many survivalists, Mr. Falwell advised stocking up on food and guns. They also were encouraged to engage in food hoarding, take lessons in self-sufficiency, and the more extreme elements planned for a total collapse of modern society. Gosh, this sounds like getting a COVID vaccine. Remember that? The mask, the COVID vaccine is the mark of the devil.
I do not remember that.
End times are coming. Interestingly, there was a sort of a dissenting voice in the Christian space. A guy named Carl Stringer, I guess, in a commentary that he published says, fear-creating writers sold over 45 million books, citing every conceivable catastrophe from civil war, planes dropping from the sky, to the end of the civilized world as we know it. Reputable preachers were advocating food storage as a head for the caves mentality. No banks failed, no planes crashed, no wars or civil war started. And yet not one of those prophets of doom has ever apologized for their scaremongering tactics. I like this guy.
Shocking.
Some prominent North American Christian ministries and leaders generated huge personal profits through sales of Y2K preparation kits, generators, survival guides, published prophecies, and a wide range of other merchandise. Christian journalist Rob Boston has documented it in an article, which I love the name of, False Prophets, spelled Prophets, Real Prophets, spelled the correct way, or whatever. Religious right leaders.
Because prophets aren't correct.
And the subtitle of, oh my God, it's too long. Religious right leaders' wild predictions of Y2K disaster didn't come true, but they made money anyway.
Shocking.
Yeah, it's just really disgusting, though.
What? The church being really disgusting?
They didn't pay any taxes on it. It's the worst part.
Oh, yeah, fair.
The total cost of the work done in preparation for Y2K is estimated to have surpassed around $300 billion US. The IDC, which is the International Data Corporation, which sounds like one of those villainous corporations like Umbrella Corp or, like whatever, Wayne Industries, or was it Wayne?
Wayne Enterprises.
Wayne Enterprises.
But wait, they're not villainous. That's Batman's corporation.
I know. I'm just saying. Like it sounds. Anyway, it calculated the U.S. spent an estimated $134 billion preparing for Y2K and another $13 billion fixing problems in 2000 and 2001. Yeah, it's insane. And I'm about to sneeze. Hold on.
And just to cover for that sneeze, it is crazy that they got away with this. But he didn't sneeze.
Yeah, it never sneezed. It's a conspiracy. So there's basically two views of Y2K and its handling. There's the supporting view, which basically says that the vast majority of the problems were fixed correctly and that the money that was spent was justified. And that's why nothing really happened, is what they argue. It was a preemptive alarm. And they said that those who hold the view say or cite the fact that very few problems occurred because the project was done so well and so completely. And that if they hadn't done it, the computer programs would have failed miserably as expected and we'd be screwed. I have trouble with that point of view because it's like, no one's ever that good. Like asking the world, both governmental and private entities, to cooperate to implement a plan and then saying, yeah, we had 100% success with that or close to it. It's just BS to me.
I mean, I think, and you're going to tell us what the opposing view is, and I think that there's a middle ground between the two.
Probably. The opposing view is that there were no or very few critical problems to begin with, and it also asserts there would have been only a few minor mistakes, and that fixing things as they broke would have been a good approach and more efficient. Basically, the IDC, the International Data Corporation, estimated the U.S. may have wasted $40 billion. But what kind of statement is that? May have wasted?
Right.
But like industries such as schools, for example, which didn't get much in the way of help, did fine, which is weird. And then countries like South Korea and Russia invested little to nothing in Y2K remediation, yet had pretty much negligible Y2K problems when compared to countries that spent tons of money.
But that's not a fair comparison. Maybe Russia, but I mean, Russia fell apart in the early 90s, or the Soviet Union fell apart in the early 90s, which meant that they didn't have a lot of infrastructure in technology. I
don't think a hammer and sickle really uses software, like
right.
Like, I don't think the babushka is there.
Same with South Korea. South Korea is small enough that like our national infrastructure is still running on like computers from the mid 90s in some aspects. The
military is even worse,
right? And it's those are the things that would have failed had they not done preemptive patching.
The whole power grid runs through one Gateway 2000 somewhere in Maryland.
Yeah, they still have
it's got a 486 box in it, and like the 5-inch floppy disk. I mean, there's some things that have like crazy old media that they still have to use. Like in the military, I'm sure that there's places where you have to use a 5-inch floppy.
Yeah,
and there's nothing else. Like there was something I saw where to upgrade like the nuclear missile launch facilities, they use like a floppy disk.
Yeah, they went from a 5-inch to a 3.5-inch, or 3. Yeah, 3.
So I just remember it being personally like very dramatic, very crazy. Like I remember Y2K as being this frenzy of like, let's try to fix the stuff before it all goes bad, and like everything was going to be ruined is how I remember it. And I saw something, it was like a Best Buy sticker that said, like, remember to turn off all of your electronics before midnight on 12/31/1999.
I do remember that.
They were literally recommending that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't remember that until you mentioned it, but that is, I do remember that. I remember, like, I was like, why are my parents not freaking out about this? And
they probably knew a little bit better than I did. Like, as a kid,
Yeah, as a kid, you hear the TV say, the end of the world's happening on New Year's Eve, 1999.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah, and then you listen to REM.
Strike.
And speaking of which, we got copyright struck for Gaz and Dange's background music last week.
That doesn't surprise me. Well, they only played 48 seconds of it, so...
Yeah, usually they cut it out during the...
it's because we didn't write I do not own the rights to this music in the description, like old people on Facebook.
To be fair, it didn't get claimed. It was just some other person has uploaded the same video game music, and it was just like, yeah, I'm like, that's, you can't claim it if it's not yours either. Anyway,
what's your recollection?
I remember maybe we had an extra like pack of toilet paper upstairs.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't really stock up. I was concerned. I was like, why are we not freaking out? But then like one of my parents was like, well, if you think about it, it's already happened around the world by the time it got to us.
That is true. You make a very good point.
So, and it's not
we
like...
We would know by now if it was like completely catastrophic.
Exactly.
About a day in advance.
So that put my mind at ease. I do remember you mentioned the turn off your electronics thing, and that was dumb. It whipped us into a frenzy, but I think there's valid upgrades needed to coding.
Like I'm glad that they did identify the problem and actually like fix it.
Yeah, or like know ahead of time what to do if a bug came up. But at the same time, I think I support the supporting view more than the opposing view, but like neither extreme, but more on the supporting side, because if you write bad code, you should fix it.
I know, and I think fixing, even if it wasn't likely to be a problem, fixing critical infrastructure, like, fix the air traffic control system, fix the nuclear launch programs.
Mm-hmm. The electrical grid.
If the Macintosh at the local elementary school displays the wrong date for 5 minutes, like no one gives a crap about that. Yeah, so I kind of agree with that.
Yeah. But still, it's... I'm looking forward to when it comes back and bites us in the ass. Now that you mentioned they didn't do full patches, they just did.
Well, the other thing that
it
was a good point was like, fix it. But the reality is, over the course of 20 or 30 years, new systems are going to come in and replace it. And hopefully the code has been written better. And that's true in a lot of sectors, but not the government sector. So that's a bit of a concern.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But I'm glad that they did some of the changes that needed to be made, and hopefully we're better for it, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's it for this week's edition of Namely 90s. Remember, you can find new episodes out every Monday. Join us next week for a variety show episode. Find us on Twitter and Instagram, or just Instagram at Namely 90s with a 90s. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/namely90s, also with a 90s. Finally, you can contact us through our website, namely90s.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Mass Hysteria, Deezer, TuneIn, iHeart, Good Pods, and wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Brandon. That's Andrew, and we'll catch you next time.